When two of around 200 girls at a high school go missing, a few red flags should be raised. But when Kenyatta Haynes was first disappeared, no one at school had clues about where she went after campus, according to the Daily Citizen. She was not the type of teenager to just run away, nor were the normal signs of runaway juvenile present, and nobody at the school thought to connect Kenyatta's disappearance with Robin's weeks prior. Different from Robin's story, Kenyatta was found 2 days later in Bob Knob Creek.
Welcome back to another episode of Case Closed.
Hey, I am Kenzie James. I'm your resident researcher and fly on the wall for these episodes.
I'm Jade Doolin.
And I'm Gage Galloway. As we've expressed in the earlier 2 episodes, I apparently have a story for everything. So the game this time is, guess how many random stories I'm going to interject into this.
Mm-hmm. So we each have a number in our heads, and apparently we're not allowed to tell, because then
Here,
Gage is
Gage,
going to start
close
trying
your
to
eyes.
shoot for...
Hold up your number. Okay.
Alright, and that's how many we think he's going to actually say. He's probably
think of
think
like a lot.
at least 5 times that amount.
Yeah. Last episode, we discussed the disappearance and murder of Robin Farnsworth. Quick recap.
There's a love square where 2 boys that she constantly have to reject keep offering themselves up. But
She's dating one guy. Her best friend thinks that she's dating another. She has a 9-month-old kid.
And you can't forget, she disappeared, was found 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 2 boys that we'll be talking about in this one, that we discussed in episode 1 as well, it's confirmed that they killed...
They were convicted, so they have gone through the whole judicial system.
Mm-hmm.
They've been convicted of Kenyatta's murder.
And it's been stated that she was seen with them. And that was the first episode, ladies and gentlemen.
Just a side note before we get into that, just for a little bit more on that. Robin was found. She was reported missing 4 days after she disappeared. And just so we know that in her case did go cold. It was only treated as a runaway juvenile. It was never treated as a homicide until 7 years later, when her remains were identified.
Which makes sense because of her rough background. If you didn't see the last episode, go watch it and it'll make a lot more sense.
In our brain scattered ways of talking. So now we're shifting gears a little bit to look at the case of Robin.
And the number we should have said was, how many times will Gage mess up and restart? It's been, I think, if my count is correct,
We're close to 15.
we're at 13, I think.
I was going to shoot for a dozen. So.
Yeah.
Dang.
Alright, well, let's make it 14. Come on.
So now we're shifting gears a little bit to look at the case that is tied to Robin's case. Robin, allegedly. That's our thoughts. That's our producer's thoughts.
Well, that's a lot of people do think this, and there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but it has never been officially connected with like hard, concrete evidence or confession.
And the 2 that have been convicted of it have not pled guilty to it, therefore.
Yes.
Robin disappeared on January 1995, and 5 weeks later, Kenyatta Haynes was murdered.
18-year-old Kenyatta Haynes lived what early 2000s movies would consider a perfect life. She was a senior at Bald Knob High School, a popular cheerleader, and a model student. Had just started a job at a local restaurant, had a good family, and a strong faith. Kenyatta was an active member of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Bald Knob and Cadwell Baptist Church in Wynn. She served as a Sunday school secretary, treasurer of the usher board, participated in the choirs, and was a secretary of the youth department. In an Arkansas Democratic Gazette article on March 19, 1995, about Kenyatta's funeral, her mother, Dorothy Hayne Rogers, said she and Kenyatta had gone through a spiritual awakening in the weeks leading up to her death. She said Kenyatta couldn't wait to get home from work to read her Bible. Well, this girl is a lot different from last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Last episode, the girl was 15, not 18. 3 years younger than the boys.
Mm-hmm. She had a more troubled background, which is why they thought it was a runaway.
At the very end of the last episode, the quote stated that they were from the rough side of town, the rough living, and they were just trying to make it. This seems to be
Completely
very different.
the opposite.
On March 8th, 1995, Kenyatta was seen all day at school and was last seen around 2:20 p.m. She checked out of school to go get a snack at Taco Bell.
Me too.
This, according to the Arkansas Democratic Gazette article, March 13th, 1995. She was supposed to return for cheer practice at 3:30 p.m., but was not there, nor at her shift at the Bulldog restaurant that evening. A March 10th, 1995 article, the Daily Citizen, said Rogers expected Kenyatta's home sometime between 4:30 and 6 p.m. On March 8th, and she began to worry. Then her daughter did not show. Kenyatta's friends called Rogers at 4:20 p.m. to tell her that Kenyatta did not show up for practice. Rogers called Bald Knob police around 6 p.m. and the search began, which mentioned in the last episode, this is over a period of hours. In the last episode, it was over a period of days before they filed the missing persons report.
Mm-hmm. The search continued for about a day and a half until the morning of Friday, March 10th. Kenyatta's aunt, Verla Phillips, found her body around 9:15 to 9:30 a.m. in a wooded area of Overflow Creek near Wamsley Road in the Bald Knob Country Club. The Daily Citizen and Democrat Gazette says Kenyatta's body was found with stab wounds, signs of binding, strangulation, beating, and raped. Her clothes had been weighed down with rocks. She was found partially clothed and had been handcuffed before being put into the creek.
Grubbs was the person of interest only hours after Kenyatta's body was found and arrested in the morning of March 11th. Temple was also arrested later that day. We mentioned earlier that these two boys were in fact friends that are not only friends but convicted together. With both charges with capital murder and kidnapping, Democratic Gazette article on March 19th, 1995 says police officers searched Grubbs' truck without his permission on March 9th while he was at school. However, former White County Sheriff's Office investigator Heather Meadows said it was neither confirmed that the truck was searched.
Kenyatta's funeral was on March 18th in the Bald Knob High School gymnasium. The Democrat Gazette reported that over 1,000 students, family, and community members were in attendance. Multiple reverends from the community spoke and prayed at the service and celebrated Kenyatta's life and goodness. It did not focus on the circumstance of her death.
So we already have Kenyatta's timeline for the day of her death, but a statement from Temple in October 1995 fills in a few of those gaps. The October 10th issue of the Democratic Gazette includes details from her statement about his and Grubbs' whereabouts that day. Temple said that he was in detention until 3:45, according to the Daily Citizen on October 10th, which means that he could not have been because she would have already been at cheer practice. According to the Daily Citizen, Temple said during questioning that Grubb did not pick him up until 4. Temple also said that Grubb offered to give Kenyatta to get food when she checked out at 2:20. Grubb did not have an alibi from 2:45 to 2:35 on March 8th and even told some of his classmates on March 9th, according to the Democratic Gazette. When Temple got struck...
Gazette.
What? Gazette, sorry. When the Temple got stuck in the truck after detention, he said Kenyatta was in a cab, alive but bound and tied, and he loosened those ties. Grubb told Temple that he had raped Kenyatta and drove the three of them to Devil's Kitchen, an isolated wooded area at Overflow Creek behind the country club. When they arrived, Grubbs tied Kenyatta to a tree. Kenyatta asked for medicine from her bag in the truck, and Temple went to get it. He heard a loud noise and turned to see Grubbs hitting Kenyatta in the head and throat with a shovel. Grubbs then asked Temple to help put rocks in Kenyatta's clothes and sink her in the creek.
Court documents show that Haynes' cause of death was multiple blows to the head, strangulation, and drowning. While the blunt force and strangulation contributed significantly to Kenyatta's death, the official cause of death was drowning. This according to a statement by prosecuting attorney Chris Raff in the Daily Citizen.
What reason could Grubb possibly have for the kidnap and murder of Kenyatta? Grubb still has not confessed to the murder, though he was convicted for 30 years, so we don't have a confirmed motive.
Grubbs and Kenyatta were friends and even shared a locker together at school. They talked on the phone frequently, and the summer before, Grubbs had taught Kenyatta how to play tennis. Bald Knob High School students and Rogers thought that Grubbs had a crush on Kenyatta. The feeling was not reciprocated, and Kenyatta had a boyfriend of a month at the time of the murder.
And this sounds familiar. I feel like we've been here before when we look back at Robin's case.
Yeah.
So it just, one of my kind of thoughts is, why does he keep going after girls who have boyfriends? Neither of those were extremely long-term relationships, but the first one at 3 months at least, and the second one at least a month. Like, it's been pretty well established at this point.
Was Grubbs the one who was possibly in a satanic cult?
Yes.
Interesting. A quote from Stacey Haynes, one of Grubbs and Temple's co-workers in the Democrat Gazette on March 19th, said that Kenyatta was nice to Grubbs, and she thought he just took it wrong.
At my home, we have this this one restaurant that every single person works with after school. And whenever you feel like this many high school people into one building to work in the afternoons, these stories that I've heard from this place are absolutely unreal. I heard of one people that broke up and got together within 3 times in a month during that time. So not only like putting people together in a school building like this can lead to stories like this where they keep asking each other out, keep having to reject them, but also in work, like this could go any way. It appears that Grubbs pursued both Robin and Kenyatta romantically and was shut down both times, and from what we've been able to tell, multiple times.
Allegedly, yes. It never actually, like, we never got a number for how much, but it does appear that, you know, it could have been, very well could have been more than just once trying to ask her out.
Other than the suspects and offenders and the fact that the girls went to the same school, this is only one of the things that connects the two victims. Therefore, it is a seemingly possible theory that the murders could have been crimes of passion. Kenyatta's aunt, Vrella Phillips, said that the families thought her murder was an act of crime of passion, according to 1995 Democratic Gazette. But again, we do not have a confession from Grubbs and nothing for certain, so any theories we don't discuss about motive are purely speculation.
Any other theories?
Just more stories.
After their arrest on March 11th, Grubbs and Temple were held without bond at White County Detention Center until their trials ordered by White County Circuit Judge Robert Edwards.
So just a note I wanted to throw out there. Obviously, we're going to see Edwards through this case, through this episode and the next episode, where we'll get into who are Grubbs and Temple a little bit more. But so we'll see his name pop up because he did oversee this case. But he also was over the most recent case. We did throw out, and was it the last episode or the opening, that Grubbs has had some recent legal action just a week and a half ago, and Edwards is actually the judge over that case again. So it's an interesting thing that he was able to continue with that case since he had already been on it before.
I'm surprised they let him do that, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's just another story.
Grubbs was 17 at the time of Kenyatta's murder, and Temple was 18, and both were tried as adults. Capital murder and kidnapping charges were punishable by 10 to 40 years or life imprisonment, and capital murder was also punishable by the death penalty if the prosecution chose to pursue it. Temple pled not guilty by mental deficiency, and a psychological evaluation was ordered.
It was mentioned earlier with the teacher that stated, is that the same person that the teacher said was not creative enough?
Yeah, they said that Temple wasn't creative enough to make up something.
Because he had told them a story and they went to check the place and there was no proof or anything there. And so the teachers then stated that he is not a creative enough individual to lie in a story like that.
Well, not necessarily he's not creative enough, because I feel like that's kind of like a subjective thing, but she just didn't think he was capable of lying, especially about something of that significance. But to be able to say, like, I saw my friend, like, my friend showed me this girl's body that he murdered, like, that's just not something you can easily lie about.
Also not something you just say.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of showing more and more through this case that he's not in the right mind. Psych evaluate.
I was going to say in high school we read this book where it was about a murder case similar to, not similar to this, but of the same, where, like, one of the people was insane and everything like that. And we'd like to sit there in class all day and we were trying to, like, predict who actually what happened, how this happened, and everything else like that, and why they did it. And we did that over 3 months, and then we got to the part of the book where it explained the mental insanity of the one person, and it just kind of like connected the dots and the fact that, like, that's actually how in this book they were caught. So it makes sense in this that, like, this is how he's getting his friend to do this stuff with him.
Psych evaluations were actually ordered for both offenders in May, and the tests were completed later that summer in August of 1995. Temple did have a learning disability, which we will talk about more later, but he was found mentally competent to stand trial. Grubbs and Temple were found mentally culpable at the time of Kenyatta's murder, which means their mental state was sufficient for them to take responsibility for the crime. On April 5th of 1995, both Grubbs and Temple pled not guilty. Grubbs changed his plea on September 26 to avoid facing the death penalty. According to a September 28th Democrat Gazette article, Grubbs admitted in court that he hit Kenyatta repeatedly in the head and neck with a shovel. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. There have been recent hearings for Grubbs in the last 7 years, including just a week and a half before we recorded this episode, but we will explain those in a later episode.
Yes, and then just a side note about, I know we've mentioned the death penalty obviously a few times. So they did both plead guilty. It was more of a legal thing to face life in prison versus the death penalty. I don't remember where Arkansas stands at this moment in time. I know there's been some recent just bills tried to get passed. There's been some recent debates about it in the legislature dealing with just different ways of execution. I know Louisiana just passed one to where they're now doing executions by nitrogen gas. So there's a lot of topics. Not only the legality of it is the death penalty hasn't been practiced here for years, but so it's like, is it ethical to do it with nitrogen? So that's just been a really big discussion recently. All that to say, I don't really remember what Arkansas's ruling on that was, but I do know that there was discussions about the death penalty. But at the time in 1995, the death penalty was still being practiced.
Temple's pretrial was delayed a few times, but on October 10th, he was charged. He changed his plea to guilty. The prosecution dropped his charge of capital murder to first-degree murder, did not pursue the kidnapping charge. Temple was sentenced to life in prison. His sentence did not specify life without parole, but Meadows says Temple will not have the opportunity for parole. She also says that with the learning disability Temple had, his mental state has regressed since being incarcerated. Just wondering, making sure we talk more about like that later, right?
About like the life without parole, or what specifically are you asking?
I think it's mental.
The mental
Capacity, yeah.
Yeah, so I did talk with him. I don't know specifically what learning disability he had. I do know that growing up specifically in Bald Knob High School, he was in the resource room, like for a lot of classes. So that's kind of where you get pulled out to either like take a test with like no distractions, or it's like you just need you can be in the classroom for the teaching, but to like understand the lesson, you might need a little bit more one-on-one time. So not exactly sure what disability it was, but there was something that he's had there. And then something else I just wanted to point out is, so both of them did have capital murder and kidnapping charges. The prosecution chose not to pursue the kidnapping charge. Temple's was first-degree murder, and Grubbs was capital. But they both pled guilty. I don't have the official reason as to why his charge was dropped to first degree.
It's really weird that they chose like putting rocks in the person's clothes to sink them right there, because you're gonna have to cut this part because it's gonna sound morbid, but that doesn't work. Like especially
Why does it not work?
Just because it's not enough.
Yeah.
The human body. Now, it would work for a couple days, but we're talking about the girl earlier that was gone for 2 years. And in this case, if you put just a few rocks into the clothes will eventually have something live in it, especially in a freshwater area. It was a pond, or was it a lake?
It was a creek.
It was a creek, which is even worse because they have crawdads and stuff like that. The decomposition of the body will make it float a lot sooner, no matter how many rocks, especially if they like put them in the back of the shirt. So unless they know what they're doing, which they definitely didn't, there's not a viable way for them to actually have disposed of the body.
Okay, well, one thing I'd like to point out with this is not only like, especially if she's alive, I get that, like, you know, you can like try to swim or fight it, but she, at this point, she's already been raped. Like, she's been tied up, she's been beaten with this shovel. So we do know that those contributed to her death, but the official death was drowning. So it's like, not only that point, we don't even know if she was conscious at this point. So like she's already just like not able to fight, not able to defend herself in any way. She's extremely injured. But you also think about the timeline. Kenyatta was found 2 days later.
Yeah.
And that could have been why she was found so easily, is because it was more visible.
Well, she would have floated.
Mhm.
It's just like, we deal with a lot of hunting and different things like that, and you'll find it where like animals will try to store a different animal underwater, especially snakes and stuff like that, and or fish will do some stuff like that, especially with crocodiles. That's how you can find it, is because you'll find bodies just floating because they'll start to decompose and rise to the surface. So it's just kind of, it just, if they spent so much time with the other one, why are they rushing through this one? Anyway, let's cut.
And we don't, and that goes back
That's
to the
what we don't
timeline
know.
of kind of when was she disappeared, because the official date of death for Robin is January 31st, but there is kind of that outlier statement of, was there a possibility she was there?
It's two different girls. One of the girls is clearly being looked for and sought after, and they know immediately, okay, she's missing. But with Robin, it was, oh, she probably ran away.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they
This is a
probably knew
commentary
that
on
as
class.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably just knew that they could get away with it more because not as many people.
It was the body
There.
found where they hid it.
I just kind of have the general idea of like Devil's Kitchen, Walmsley Road, Bald Knob Country Club, but we don't have like a pin on Google Maps. And there's no really like specific area where it's like, hey, this is Devil's Kitchen. So I think that's kind of just like a local name where it's like, you have nicknames. Like
there.
for us here, it's like Walmart, like big Walmart versus small mart. But if you walk up to someone who's maybe from like 3 hours away and you say, oh, we're gonna go to small mart, do you want to come? They're not gonna know what that is.
Yeah.
So I feel like Devil's Kitchen might be that, where it's where it's an area that people know about if
But
you're a
we just
local. So
don't
it's
know.
kind of like, hey, we're gonna go meet at the creek at this place. Okay,
Well,
that's this portion of the creek.
We had a Devil's Kitchen back home, and it was in parentheses to where they dumped all the fish and everything. You'd pull up on the side and you cook there, and then you dump your dead fish remains. And so a bunch of snakes would live there, and so people would get bit.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what this was or kind of the reason for that name. I did try to find out, but I just couldn't find anything about like a Devil's Kitchen in Bald Knob. The little bit I did find in an article that mentioned it was kind of just like, it could have been like a youth hangout. So we don't have an exact location. We just kind of have the general area of, okay, maybe it's like from this stretch to this stretch on this part of the creek. She was found somewhere along this area.
Kenyatta is still remembered with memorials in Bald Knob, a day, a park, and a scholarship. Kenyatta was remembered annually on May 3rd, Kenyatta Haynes Day. Bald Knob Mayor Barth Grayson proclaimed the day in May 2021, and a city council member presented Rogers with a framed printing plate of the Bald Knob banner front from March 16, 1995, which was a memorial for Kenyatta. Bald Knob Mayor Gary Looney says that the day has not been observed for a couple of years. This was not on purpose, and Gary says the changes in administration was part of the reasons the day has been overlooked. Kenyatta Haynes Park on Ash Street in Bald Knob was built and dedicated sometime prior to 2012. We were not able to find the date of this dedication, but found mention of the park in 2012, so we know it was built before then.
The March 31st, 1995 edition of the Daily Citizen announced the establishment of the Kenyatta Haynes Memorial Scholarship to the Bald Knob Public Education.
This is just so interesting how different the two cases are. Because clearly there are ways like that they for sure are connected. Like these two men are in both stories, whether they are the murderers or not. But with Kenyatta, she died and was immediately found, and you can just see how much of a presence she had, and a lot of that because of the social class.
And that just, my heart just really goes out to Robin's family, obviously, because, to both families, but they did have this closure, and there are things to remember Kenyatta, but Robin hasn't had that because she had the closure. And I do really wish that there was something there. And
it was later. Like, it's not even like the whole, the murder, the finding, anything like that. It's the fact that, like, since it was later, like, by then, all trails go cold.
Yeah. And that's why this case is closed. Is because of that. And I wonder if it had been handled differently, if we would know if they were completely connected.
Well, part of the difference with the way they were handled, so Robin's case was originally the Bald Knob Police Department, and then later got transferred to the White County Sheriff's Office, but Kenyatta started as the White County Sheriff's Office. So we're not only talking about just like maybe different people working the cases, but they're completely different entities. Like obviously they still work together and everything, but it is different people handling the case.
We've looked at both cases now, and we've talked a little bit about the suspects, but we really haven't taken a deep dive into who they are. Stay tuned for the next episode of Case Closed, where we'll discuss the stories of James Grubbs and Donnie Temple.